Welcome, scoundrels, back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. There's a reference link in the description below. If you'd like to be a scoundrel, there is a subscribe button down below on the right hand side. Feel free to click it. Feel free to get involved and join the gang. Today we're going to be talking about something a little different. We're going to be talking about the Eve Echoes roadmap. We're going to talk about the planned content and talk a little bit about what that might mean. I've actually got the list up here on the left as it was thoughtfully posted by a user called NU11U5. They essentially accessed the public Trello board and transcribed everything over into a neat little list. Okay, so let's begin with the November 2020 milestones. This is stuff that will be coming in 2 months, and we'll begin with send Omega as a gift to your friends. Now, I assume that's either going to be with Plex or just by buying it with real life money. I don't know for sure whether it's going to be both. I would imagine that it's going to be paying with real life money, just because it's going to be a way for them to generate extra income. But if it is with Plex, that's even better. So I really like this change. I think either or, even with with Plex and with real life money, it's a really nice change to have here for Eve Echoes. General balance adjustments. This is going to be a really interesting one to me because I'm not sure what the general balance adjustments are going to be looking for. Like, I'm interested in your guys' opinions on this. What do you think needs nerfed and what do you think needs buffed? I personally think lasers kind of need a buff. I don't think anybody's really using lasers apart from if you're running in a Omen, for instance. I think maybe drone ranges could get nerfed, but they do require a significant investment to get there. I'm expecting missiles to take a nerf just because of the popularity of them in PvE, but I think the problem with missiles is that, especially rapid mediums, I think rapid mediums could get hit, but I do have a little bit of a worry that, I've invested everything into missiles. If they nerf them to the point where they're unusable, I'll be a little bit sad, but I would imagine like maybe medium rapids could get a little bit of a nerf in terms of DPS, maybe range, I'm just not exactly sure. But yeah, it's worth thinking about what could be nerfed and what could be buffed. I'm imagining the Caracal could get nerfed due to the popularity of the ship. I'm expecting things like the Moa to get a slight buff potentially. I'm interested to see what they actually go through and buff and nerf in terms of general balance adjustments. I think you have to be very careful in Eve to make sweeping balance changes because, as a clone, if they nerf missiles to the point where they're kind of unusable or they're not that good, then I've invested hours of my time to become a missile user, and I can't just undo that. So whether they could just say, we've adjusted these particular weapons, you have a chance to refund all of your skill points and then invest them somewhere else if you want, that might be what they do. What would you guys like to see happen? I think that would be something that I would be happy with if you could get a refund on skills. But and that's a really interesting thing. I don't know exactly what they're doing in terms of buffing and nerfing, but it's going to be a very complicated subject to cover because obviously there's a lot of real life time, a lot of hours put into getting specific weapon types, and if they get nerfed to a point where they're not that usable in the same scenarios anymore, it could be difficult to navigate. New pirate mechanics, and I'm going to kind of go through this with all anomalies as well. New pirate mechanics called a dynamic pirate fleet. All anomalies will use this new dynamic pirate fleet. Now, I've seen a couple of explanations of what this could be. I've seen explanations in terms of EVE Online. I've seen explanations in terms of what people expect it to be. Now, what a dynamic pirate fleet could be, and this is, I assume it's going to be this. It's just going to be varying the types of ships that you're facing in anomaly waves. So there's a very bread and butter way of the game giving you pirate waves in anomalies as well as encounter missions. It generally tends to be a few frigates, a few destroyers, and a few cruisers and a few battle cruisers, depending on the anomaly. You tend to get like 2, 2, 2, 2, or 1, 1, 2. It's pretty much the same every single wave that you face. What I imagine dynamic pirate fleets is going to mean that they are going to vary the kind of ships that they send to you on a wave by wave basis. And someone mentioned that when it comes to EVE Online, they actually send ships specifically to try and counter what you're running. So if you're running a cruiser, they might try and send more frigates to make it more difficult for you to deal damage to them. If you're running a speed tank, they might send out webs to try and webify you. But I'm assuming it's just going to make the pirate fleets that you engage a little bit more varied and a little bit more engaging, and it's going to make them potentially a little bit harder. So I'm assuming it's going to increase the difficulty level overall of things like anomalies, things like encounter missions and stuff like that. I'm very interested to know what dynamic pirate fleets means specifically, but I know that several people have explained it as basically varied ship waves that you're going to see, and also explained it as potentially seeing ships that are designed specifically to try and counter what you're bringing to that particular, to that particular encounter. So that's what I assume it could mean. Encounter balance adjustments. I'm wondering what they're actually going to balance. Are they going to make things harder or make things easier? A lot of people are kind of cheesing a lot of these encounters by having, a frigate warp in, draw aggro, and then you go in and you sort of clear things out. I'm wondering if they're going to make things harder or make things easier. That's going to be an interesting one to look at. Obviously, not a lot of these encounters are easily soloable, and you need a kind of a fleet to get through them. A new mission in the counter. A new mission is a delivery mission, so you're going to have a mission to deliver things. So they're going to add a new mission encounter for that thing. And then we're going to get sort of new modules or new fittings that we can add. A remote sensor dampener. A remote sensor dampener is basically a fitting that's going to prevent your target or the target of the remote sensor dampener being able to lock targets more easily, and you can usually focus fire this to make it very difficult for a cruiser to lock onto frigates at all, meaning that they can't actually attack you. So I'm very much excited to see the remote sensor dampeners come in. It's going to add a new facet to PvP. Warp scramblers. Now these are similar to warp disruptors, but they are closer range. They usually have higher warp disruption strength, and they also stop the use of micro warp drives, or limit the use of micro warp drives. So warp scramblers are just more powerful versions of warp disruptors, but they require a closer range of application. So we're going to be seeing more aggressive PvP options being available to us coming into November 2020. Target painters. So target painters are going to be electronic warfare slots that essentially increase the signature radius of an enemy ship. So if you are in a cruiser using medium fittings and you want to be able to take a frigate out more easily, a target painter will allow you to increase the signature radius of the enemy ship, making it much easier for you to actually land damage on them. It's going to be a big bonus for things like medium railgun users, medium laser users, people that traditionally struggle to deal with frigates, and it's going to make them easier, especially for if you're using medium missiles. Having a target painter is going to alleviate some of the issues that you have when trying to range tank and deal with frigates. So I'm very excited to see target painters come in, because they're going to help out a lot in terms of dealing with the frigates, which can be quite pesky right now, especially if they're speed tanking. And one of the biggest new additions coming into November is interdiction sphere launchers. An interdiction sphere is essentially an area of space which you are unable to warp out of. So it's going to lock you from warping inside this space. These are classically used on gates in nullsec, where you can jump out of a gate and into an interdiction sphere, and then you're going to be targeted by pirates. It is going to make traveling through nullsec a little bit more dangerous, because essentially warp bubbles can be set up to stop you or bring you out of warp and can prevent you from warping away, which, if they are set up in the correct locations, those can be very pesky for those of you trying to navigate nullsec, especially if you're AFK navigating nullsec, because these bubbles can be set up in the common places by which people jump out of gates from, or jump to gates from an AFK perspective. Especially if there are only 2 exit gates in a system, these warp bubbles can be set up on the exact vector from one gate to another, and it can bring you out of warp and you can get killed. So these are going to change the way you play the game in nullsec, and it's going to make everybody a little bit more I guess, scared about how they approach these particular systems. The only problem that I have with interdiction sphere launchers coming in November is there's no mention of bookmarks. That's one of the problems. Bookmarks are areas in space in which you can set your own bookmark, and often these are used to tactically approach gates to ensure that you're avoiding warp bubbles. So that is one problem that I'm going to have here. If interdiction spheres get launched and they don't have things like bookmarks, it's going to be very weird about the power that interdiction spheres are going to have is going to be very high. There's a little diagram above, by the way, by a guy called Wadade or Wadade, I don't know how to pronounce it. I found it on Reddit, and it just kind of explains how interdiction bubbles work. But the TLDR of it is, if you warp, they can bring you out of warp if you warp through them. If you're inside the interdiction bubble, you would not be able to warp, and they work in like a kind of a vector. So in the sense that they block off certain areas when warping towards a point, and that's why the area of approach towards a certain point is going to be very important when dealing with interdiction bubbles. Okay, so we're going to go up a little bit further into December 2020 now. Alliance management skills. So right now, when you create an alliance for 1 billion ISK, it's 1 billion to create an alliance. All it gives you is an alliance chat. So I'm assuming there's going to be extra alliance management skills coming to coming to EVE in December 2020, which will be good. So if you've got an alliance set up, fear not, there'll be more options coming. Sovereignty battles. I'm going to assume this is coming with the sovereignty update, and I'm going to assume this is going to be like EVE Online, where areas of nullsec space can be claimed and fought over between corps, and it's going to essentially give you that political or geopolitical landscape that EVE Online has, and we're going to get that in EVE Echoes, which is going to be really, really fun. Corporation citadels. So these are going to be essentially areas or like things that you build in terms of like a hub for your corporation. I'm very, very excited to get those. Fleet 2.0. I'm guessing this is where you're allowed to join several fleets up together, so you're going to have several subsections of fleets, which is going to be really interesting. And again, you'll be able to create large fleets for battles, which are not just made up of several, groups of 10. You're going to have essentially battalions where you have several fleets inside those battalions. And time dilatation. I actually don't know enough about time dilatation. I never really played it, but I'm going to do a little bit of research and we can talk about it. So I've just followed up on time dilatation, and this is essentially an EVE Online thing, which they're going to start introducing to Echoes. And essentially what it is that when there is too many people overloading a system, especially when it comes to large-scale fleet warfare, they slow that system down a significant amount, reducing the lag and allowing you to input like commands much more easily. It's really, really good for large-scale fleet warfare because, as we noticed from one of the videos that I had earlier on this week, when we had a 300 plus battle, imagine if that gets up towards 1,000. I could barely make proper inputs happen, and the graphic settings have to be dropped to the lowest possible. With time dilatation, it's going to allow you to input your commands in a little bit more, with a little bit more freedom, without having to worry too much about lag, and it's going to be very important for phone users especially. It does mean that battles will slow down significantly, but it does allow you to plan your actions that much more readily in large-scale warfare. So I'm going to be interested about that. The guy mentions on this post that there's nothing about trade or traffic congestion fixes in the roadmap. Trade, being able to trade between individual players outside of contracts would be really nice. And traffic congestion fixes around jitter. I'm sure you're all aware of the congestion around jitter and perimeter. It's absolutely nutty right now. And I would like that to be a priority fix for them, either introducing like instance servers of jitter and perimeter so that you go into one of the two instance servers, but things like the trade systems are linked between the servers, or just increasing capacity for those particular, those high volume systems. Those are things that I do want them to prioritize and fix, especially because a lot of the people that are in jitter and perimeter right now are just bots, and they need to be wiped off the face of the planet. Right, that is everything coming up for EVE in the next few months. I hope we get extras added. If we get any extras added, that'd be great. What do you guys think of this? I'd love to hear your comments in the description below, and in the comment section below. Tell me what you think of it, what you're most excited about, what you're worried about, and yeah, I'll see you soon.